Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. My name is Daniel Fontenot, and today we will continue reading from this very important book entitled Our Authorized Bible Vindicated, speaking of the King James Bible, otherwise known as the Received Text or the Textus Receptus. And this book was written by B.G. Wilkinson, who was the Dean of Theology for Washington Missionary College back in the early, probably the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And so he was the Dean of Theology for Washington Missionary College, now known as Columbia Union College today. So we are going to be discussing and reading from his chapter the subject of the Jesuits' plan to destroy Protestantism. Yes, indeed, the Jesuits tried to destroy Protestantism. That was the reason for the Jesuits' existence in the first place. That's why they came into existence, was to destroy Protestantism, because Protestantism was beginning to overtake Europe, and Catholicism was losing much ground. So the Jesuits came to the aid of the Papacy. So here is what Brother Wilkinson tells us. I have now before my eyes on a shelf of my library a book entitled The Black Pope. These are two popes. There are two popes, the white pope and the black pope. The world little realizes how much that fact means. The white pope is the one we generally know and speak of as the pope. But the real power is in the hand of that body directed by the black pope. The black pope, which name does not refer to color, is the head of the Jesuits, an organization which outside of God's people is the mightiest that history has ever known. On the other hand, it is the most subtle and intolerant. It was formed after the Reformation began and for the chief purpose of destroying the Reformation. The Catholic Church has 69 organizations of men. It may have more now, some of whom have been in existence for over 1,000 years. Of these, we might name the Augustinians, the Benedictines, the Capuchins, the Dominicans, and so on. The Benedictines, or maybe you would say Benedictines, were founded about 540 A.D. Each order has many members, often reaching into the thousands and tens of thousands. The Augustinians, for example, to which order Martin Luther belonged, numbered 35,000 in his day. The men of these orders never marry but live in communities, or large fraternity houses known as monasteries, which are for men what the convents are for women. Each organization exists for the distinct line of endeavor. Each organization exists for a distinct line of endeavor, and each in turn is directly under the order of the Pope. They overrun all countries and constitute the army militant of the papacy. The monks are called the regular clergy, while the priests, bishops, etc., who conduct churches are called the secular clergy. Let us see why the Jesuits stand predominantly above all these, so that the general of the Jesuits has great authority within all the vast ranks of the Catholic clergy, regular and secular. Within 35 years after Luther had nailed his thesis upon the door of the Cathedral of Wittenberg and launched his attacks upon the errors and corrupt practices of Rome, the Protestant Reformation was thoroughly established. The great contributing factor to this spiritual upheaval was the translation by Luther of the Greek New Testament of Erasmus into German. The medieval papacy awakened from its superstitious lethargy to see that in a third of a century the Reformation had carried away 2/3 of Europe. Germany, England, the Scandinavian countries, Holland, and Switzerland had become Protestant. France, Poland, Bavaria, Austria, and Belgium were swinging that way. In consternation, the papacy looked around in every direction for help. So they were panicking. You can imagine the papists were. If the Jesuits had not come forward and offered to save the institution, today there might not be a Catholic Church. That would have been really good if there had not been a Catholic Church anymore. What was the offer, and what were these weapons, the like of which man never before had forged? The founder of the Jesuits was a Spaniard, Ignatius Loyola, whom the Catholic Church has canonized and made Saint Ignatius. He was a soldier in the war which King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain were waging to drive the Mohammedans out of Spain about the time that Columbus discovered America. Wounded at the siege of Pampeluna in 1521 A.D., so that his military career was over, Ignatius turned his thoughts to spiritual conquest and spiritual glory. Soon afterwards, he wrote that book called Spiritual Exercises, which did more than any other document to erect a new papal theocracy and to bring about the establishment of the infallibility of the Pope. In other words, Catholicism since the Reformation is a new Catholicism. It is more fanatical and more intolerant. Ignatius Loyola came forward and must have said, in substance, to the Pope, "Let the Augustinians continue to provide monasteries of retreat for contemplative minds. Let the Benedictines give themselves up to the field of literary endeavor." I'm sorry if I'm maybe pronouncing the word Benedictine, maybe it's Benedictines. It depends probably on where you're from. Let the Dominicans retain their responsibility by maintaining the Inquisition. But we, the Jesuits, will capture the colleges and the universities. We will gain control of instruction. Notice this. This is very, very important. And they have done so even to this day. We will gain control of instruction in law, medicine, science, education, and so weed out from all books of instruction anything injurious to Roman Catholicism. Think about that, dear friends. When you think of the mess that we are in here in the United States of America and in other countries, when you think of all the mess that we are in, it can be traced, I believe, very strongly to the Jesuits, because they have taken control of law, medicine, science, and education. We will mold the thoughts and ideas of the youth. We will enroll ourselves as Protestant preachers and college professors in the different Protestant faiths. You know, this is what they have done. This is part of their self-imposed job. Okay? It is part of their role to do this very thing, to infiltrate the Protestant churches, every single one of them. Sooner or later, we will undermine the authority of the Greek New Testament of Erasmus, and also of those Old Testament productions which have dared to raise their heads against the Old Testament of the Vulgate and against tradition. And thus we will undermine the Protestant Reformation. We now quote a few words to describe their spirit and their message from a popular writer. And this is taken from the book, The Great Controversy, page 234 to 235. Throughout Christendom, Protestantism was menaced by formidable foes. The first triumphs of the Reformation past, Rome summoned new forces, hoping to accomplish its destruction. At this time, the order of the Jesuits was created, the most cruel, unscrupulous, and powerful of all the champions of popery. To combat these forces, Jesuitism inspired its followers with a fanaticism that enabled them to endure like dangers and to oppose to the power of truth all the weapons of deception. There was no crime too great for them to commit, no deception too base for them to practice, no disguise too difficult for them to assume. Vowed to perpetual poverty and humility, it was their studied aim to secure wealth and power, to be devoted to the overthrow of Protestantism and the reestablishment of the papal supremacy. When appearing as members of their order, they wore a garb of sanctity, visiting prisons and hospitals, ministering to the sick and the poor, professing to have renounced the world, and bearing the sacred name of Jesus, who went about doing good. But under this blameless exterior, the most criminal and deadly purposes were often concealed. It was a fundamental principle of the order that the end justifies the means. Yeah, the end justifies the means. You can do whatever you want, okay, as long as in their eyes it justifies the means. By this code, lying, theft, perjury, assassination were not only pardonable but commendable when they served the interest of the church. Under various disguises, the Jesuits worked their way into offices of state, climbing up to be the counselors of kings and shaping the policy of nations. Do you not think that they have done the same thing here in the United States of America, climbing up to be the counselors of the president, the advisors of the President of the United States? You can count on it. They became servants. Yes, and also shaping the policy of nations, the political and foreign policy of the United States. Yes, the Jesuits have done so. They became servants to act as spies upon their masters. They established colleges for the sons of princes and nobles and schools for the common people, and the children of Protestant parents were drawn into an observance of popish rites. Unquote. How well the Jesuits have succeeded, let the following pages tell. Soon the brains of the Catholic Church were to be found in that order. The Jesuit order, that is. About 1582, when the Jesuit Bible was launched to destroy Tyndale's English version, the Jesuits dominated 287 colleges and universities in Europe. Their complete system of education and of drilling was likened to the constitution of the order itself, to the reducing of all its members to the placidity of a corpse, whereby the whole could be turned and returned at the will of the superior. We quote from their constitution. Quote, this is the constitution of the Jesuits. As for holy obedience, this virtue must be perfect in every point, in execution, in will, in intellect, doing what is enjoined with all serenity, spiritual joy, and perseverance, persuading ourselves that everything is just, suppressing every repugnant thought and judgment of one's own, in a certain obedience. And let every one persuade himself that he who lives under obedience should be moved and directed under divine providence, meaning the Pope's providence, by his superior, just as if he were a corpse, which allows itself to be moved and led in any direction. That's what a Jesuit is. That's what he does. He doesn't have his own mind. He's completely subservient to his superiors and to the Pope. You know, I'm going to kind of digress here for a bit. You know, people talk about all kinds of false religions in the world. Even, you know, the Muslims, you know, and what they do, their terroristic bombings and all that nonsense that they do. The Jesuits are the worst. That which put an edge on the newly forged mentality was the unparalleled system of education impressed upon the pick of Catholic youth. The Pope, perforce, virtually threw open the ranks of the many millions of Catholic young men and told the Jesuits to go in and select the most intelligent. The initiation rites were such as to make a lifelong impression on the candidate for admission. He never would forget the first trial of his faith. Thus, the youth are admitted under a test which virtually binds forever the will, if it has not already been enslaved. What matters to him? Eternal life is secure, and all is for the greater glory of God. Wow. So they basically sell themselves to the devil. Then follow the long years of intense mental training, interspersed with periods of practice. They undergo the severest methods of quick and accurate learning. They will be, let us say, shut up in a room with a heavy Latin lesson and expected to learn it in a given period of hours. Of the results achieved by means of this policy and the methods, Macaulay says, quote, "It was in the ears of the Jesuit that the powerful, the noble, and the beautiful breathed the secret history of their lives." Think about that. In the ears of the Jesuit, the powerful, the noble, and the beautiful breathed the secret history of their lives. It was at the feet of the Jesuit that the youth of the higher and middle classes were brought up from childhood to manhood, from the first rudiments to the courses of rhetoric and philosophy. Literature and science, lately associated with infidelity or with heresy, now became the allies of orthodoxy. Dominant in the south of Europe, the great order soon went forth conquering and to conquer. In spite of oceans and deserts, of hunger and pestilence, of spies and penal laws, of dungeons and racks, of gibbets and quartering blocks, Jesuits were to be found under every disguise and in every country, scholars, physicians, merchants, serving men, in the hostile court of Sweden, in the old manor house of Cheshire, among the hovels of Connaught, arguing, instructing, consoling, stealing away the hearts of the young, animating the courage of the timid, holding up the crucifix before the eyes of the dying. Nor was it less their office to plot against the thrones and lives of the apostate kings, to spread evil rumors, to raise tumults, to inflame civil wars, to arm the hand of the assassin, inflexible in nothing but in their fidelity to the church. They were equally ready to appeal in her cause to the spirit of loyalty and to the spirit of freedom. Extreme doctrines of obedience and extreme doctrines of liberty, the right of rulers to misgovern the people, the right of rulers to misgovern the people, like our present administration, the right of every one of the people to plunge his knife in the heart of a bad ruler, were inculcated by the same man according as he addressed himself to the subject of Philip or to the subject of Elizabeth. And again, quote, "If Protestantism or the semblance of Protestantism showed itself in any quarter, it was instantly met, not by petty, teasing persecution, but by persecution of that sort which bows down and crushes all but a very few select spirits. Whoever was suspected of heresy, whatever his rank, his learning, or his reputation, knew that he must purge himself to the satisfaction of a severe and vigilant tribunal, or die by fire. Heretical books were sought out and destroyed with similar vigor. And this is the Jesuits and their efforts to destroy Protestantism. Or you might say the Papacy's effort, because the Papacy approved of it, the Papacy's effort to destroy Protestantism. We will continue the reading of this chapter in the next presentation. If you agree with this presentation, then by all means tap that like button so that it can be sent far and wide to those who are hungering for the truth. And if you have any questions or comments, then we would invite you to place them at the bottom of this video. And if you have not subscribed, we hope that you will do so as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us here at Jewels of Truth. We hope and pray that you will have a good day in the Lord.